Hello, Moonbeams, and welcome back to the podcast. This is Mystic Moon School with Donna Cass, and I am here today to discuss with all of you the third and final Mars-Pluto opposition and some of the other energies that are impacting this opposition, giving you a little hindsight context for this aspect, and I will be back tomorrow with another podcast episode on the Taurus new moon, which is happening on the 27th. So 2 videos this week, and yeah, so let's get into it. So as I'm recording this on Thursday, April 24th, the exact opposition is really, in terms of Eastern Standard Time, is going to be on Friday, April 25th, when both Mars and Pluto are at 3 degrees. Now, that might be happening actually some point in the middle of the night, April 24th, but you get the gist. And really, these energies have been building already. So, because we're dealing with Pluto, and Pluto is an outer planet, so whenever we're having an aspect, particularly in opposition, with an outer planet, we feel the effects of that as it is growing, as the two planets are by degree getting closer and closer to one another. So although the exact date, the exact degree point, which is 3 degrees, by the way, of Mars and Pluto, is happening on the 25th, we've already likely been feeling this energy, and it is part of a bigger cycle that harkens back to November, the very beginning of November, November 3rd, 2024. And so this has been almost a 6-month process, and a lot has been happening, not only with this Mars-Pluto opposition, but with Mars in and of itself. And so I want to break all of this down for you, and I am looking at this from a very personal, individual lens. I acknowledge and I appreciate the larger collective impact that this has. Obviously, with any of the outer planets, there's always going to be a large collective impact. But that's not where my focus is for this podcast. My focus is on the individual, because we make up the collective. Each and every one of us as individuals make up the collective, right? And so if each and every one of us is on a healing journey, a growth journey, a journey towards awakening or awareness, healing those deep inner wounds that if you're a human, you have, then that affects the collective, right? And so it's the same with consciousness. You have your own unique consciousness that you are living through, that perspective in your own life, in your own being. But for every one of us who expand in our own individual consciousness, then that ripples out and that affects the collective consciousness. So they are not separate. They absolutely are intertwined. And so while it is perfectly legitimate to focus on the world stage and the larger impacts that's happening in the collective, it's just not where my focus is for this podcast, at least not at this time. That doesn't mean that I won't throw in here and there little tidbits of what may be happening in the collective and how it may be impacting us individually, or how it may be an expression of what's happening with the planets, but it's just not the main focus. So let's break this down, okay? So first of all, I want to start by reminding you that this opposition began, the exact opposition began on November 3rd, 2024. So let's begin there. Just take a moment, close your eyes. Think back about 5, almost 6 months ago to the very beginning of November, last fall, 2024, maybe even in October, right? Because as I was saying, these energies were building as the aspect was becoming more exact by degree. And so you can even think back to October 2024. And what was going on in your life then? What were some of the bigger impacts happening, unfolding, showing up in your life? Because that is when this opposition began. Now, of course, we can think back to, if you live in the US, that we were approaching the presidential election, just to give you the larger context. And so that might have been a very personal thing for you, and it might have shown up in other areas of your life. But I want you to think more about your own personal, very personal journey, your life, where you're living, what your relationship status was, what your career and or social status was at that time. Thinking about where you were at that time on your own healing journey, your journey towards growth, self-awareness. Thinking about what challenges you may have been facing at that time. And then I want you to, once you have a couple of things in your mind about this time period, hit the pause button on that. The end of 2024. What were the biggest things that were impacting you and your personal life at that time? And then very quickly thereafter, right around the new year, January 2nd, we had our second out of the 3, excuse me, Pluto and Mars opposition. So the first 2 were much closer together. And it was, just from my own personal recollection, excuse me, it was a really intense time. The end of fall into winter and the new year, 2025, it felt very dense. It felt very heavy. It felt like grief. It felt like a deep going within. And at the same time, it felt like a lot was coming up and being purged. And when I say purged, what I mean is things coming up to the surface, to your awareness, your conscious awareness, from a very deep place in your subconscious that maybe were manifesting as fears that were really coming up for you to see, to acknowledge, to deal with, to look at and say, oh my gosh, like, why does this feel so in my face right now? It did not, for me personally, it did not feel at all like a new year where I was ready for this like new start and, it felt like, okay, let's go. It did not feel like that at all. It felt very dense and it felt very anchored to the physical world where I had a lot of deep feelings. There was a lot of grief for me personally. But it was also existential in that I was understanding at a different level this human experience, life, death, that it's a spectrum. So many things, right? And so thinking back to this time period, what were you moving through? What darkness were you facing? Maybe there was a lack of clarity for you at that time. Maybe there was a feeling of stuckness. Maybe it was none of these things. Maybe it was very different. Maybe it felt empowering. And it felt like you were stepping into a new level of independence, asserting yourself, making decisions for yourself and your life. And it could have felt scary, yes, but it also felt empowering. And I also want to say it could have really felt like there's no going back. Like whatever was transpiring for you back in November through January, it was happening whether you wanted it to happen or you didn't want it to happen. It was happening, and then you were faced with having to deal with it. So please leave me some comments below if you feel open to sharing what may have been your experience at the end of 2024 and the very beginning of 2025. And then we're going to fast forward to now, to April. Now, that's a lot of time between January and end of April, right? And a lot may have transpired for you in your life in these several months. You have very possibly been making some very big changes in your life. And that's going to differ for everybody, of course. We all have our own unique path and journey. But the energies, I feel, are still universal and work with us in our own unique ways. So with this final Pluto opposing Mars, this opposition, I really feel strongly that there is a destruction and a deconstruction for each of us at some level with our wounded egoic self. And I think that this has been a long process happening since last fall, especially. And, you know, I also want to remind you that this whole time, almost the whole time, Mars has been retrograde. For a large part, Mars was retrograde in the sign of Cancer, which is tied to our childhood self, our early growing up years, the nurturing that we need to feel safe, emotionally safe, perhaps the nurturing that we did not receive. And so I feel that when Mars was retrograding in these last 6 months through the sign of Cancer, always in this opposition to Pluto, whether it was by exact degree or not, it was still close enough, because Mars began this journey retrograding in Cancer while Pluto was still in Capricorn, the very final degree. And so that was part of that immense intensity that we were all feeling. And it could have been a very emotional time for us. And why? Why is like one of my lifelong questions. Just that one word, why. I always want to understand the why. And so why? Why was this happening? Well, we are all moving into these more empowered versions of ourselves. And truthfully, the only way to do that is that we need to first unpack, go within deeply, and take a real close look at our wounding, our core wounding, our deepest fears, those feelings of not being good enough. And that takes many different forms. We have abandonment wounds, rejection wounds, not being able to receive love, not being able to speak our truth, be our authentic selves. I mean, there's so many ways, right, that our core wounding will manifest, and that again is different for each of us. And so to step into a more embodied, authentic, and empowered sense of self, oftentimes we must first deconstruct that wounding. The ego self that wants to keep us safe and small and protected. And that's the part that needs to get shattered, quite frankly. That needs to be blown to bits, or in an explosive way. And sometimes it does happen that way, especially with Pluto opposing Mars. Something can happen in an explosive way in your life. And when I say explosive, yes, I use that word specifically because there's destruction that happens. But, you know, sometimes it's tricky. Sometimes we have an incredible, amazing experience in our life, and it's also explosive because it destroys a part of ourselves that needed to be broken up. Sometimes it's explosive in a frightening way, or a sad or grief-stricken way, certainly. But sometimes that explosiveness can happen as well from a beautiful experience. It doesn't really matter necessarily in what ways that explosiveness will show up in your life. The important thing is to recognize the bigger purpose of it. Don't get caught in the micro look of the situation, or the experience, but zoom out a little bit when you can. Take some deep breaths and say, okay, why? Why is this happening? What is this here to teach me? And my answer, without even knowing what you're going through, is going to be to heal, to come back to your center, your true, authentic self. And what that really means is your true, authentic self is that part of you that is not wounded. That's the part of you that knows that you're loved, that knows that you are always guided by your intuitive higher self, that you have a team, a spirit team, guardian angels that are always working, orchestrating, protecting you, loving you, guiding you. This connection to something bigger, more vast, energetic, beyond your human self. And so when you can step back from an explosive situation and say, remind yourself, right? Remind ourselves, why is this happening to me? Or why is this happening for me? Then we can really open up and expand our consciousness to understanding what the lesson is. In doing this, we can then begin to see patterns. And then the patterns begin to connect, like connecting the dots in your life, all the way back to when you were a child. Your upbringing, your experiences, the things that happened and birthed that wounding. And when we begin to see this from this expanded and more healed perspective, we can then rise up in an understanding and an awareness that this is what I came here for. I'm not a victim to this. I'm not a victim to anything in my life. Now, I want to be clear that, like, there's a difference between dropping into victim mindset once in a while and having a pity party and living from that energy. Very, very, very big difference. And perhaps some of what has exploded in your life even is showing you where you have lived from that victim mindset, because that is the most disempowering energy, right? Is the victim. And so that doesn't mean you can't have a pity party for yourself once in a while, but you have to have the awareness that that's what you're doing. You're choosing it consciously because you need to just go into that for a little while and kind of vent it out. And then you say, okay, timer up. I'm done with that. Now I can zoom out. I can see the lessons. Now, I want to explain to you why, from my perspective, this is what the astrology is showing me. Pluto. Pluto is the planet of the underworld, right? Hades. The deep, the dark, the subconscious, the place of death and rebirth, of destruction, but all towards the end of realignment and being able to face what is not in alignment, what is not in integrity in our lives. And when I say in our lives, I really mean within us, because our whole lives are merely a canvas, and our energy, our mindset, our choices are the brushes. And so we create that life from our mindset, our perspectives, and our choices. And so Pluto will, when it makes an opposition to a planet, it is going to, it's a face-off, right? It is that mirror that you cannot escape. It's like the hall of mirrors. No matter where you turn, you're going to see yourself. And you're going to see the truth, whether you want to or not. And so Pluto will show us the deepest, darkest fears that we didn't even really know were there. And they will come up to the surface in a big way, in a loud way, in an explosive way. Now, when Pluto is opposing Mars, which is not often talked about, but I strongly resonate with the archetype of the ego. It's the sun is the ego as well, but in a different way. I feel that Mars can go into in the lower expressions. This Mars ego is that wounded ego, that wounded sense of self. When it's aggressive and defensive and warlike and it has to fight about everything, right? Those are the darker expressions, the shadow expressions of Mars. And so with this Pluto-Mars opposition, because Mars, remember, was retrograding. So any retrograde for any planet is all about reflection, rewinding, revisiting, reconnecting, redoing, all the rewords. I could go on and on, right? But you get the picture. And so Mars wants to go, 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 forward, right? The runner on the track. And when Mars is retrograde, it's as if that runner has an anchor tied to each ankle. Or I love the visualization of running through water. That's how I see Mars retrograde, especially in a water sign like Cancer. Now, as we know, Cancer is, as I mentioned earlier, about nurturing, about childhood experiences, childhood conditioning. You see how this is all tying together. And so Mars retrograding in Cancer, opposing Pluto. I mean, this is that childhood wounding. It is the childhood conditioning. All of the stuff that we had to absorb because we were kids and we really didn't have much of a choice. And began to shape us. There's a lot here as well in terms of the nurturing energies of Cancer and whether we felt nurtured when we needed it most or not. Part of healing our core wounding, maybe the biggest part actually, I should say, is learning how we can meet our own emotional needs. So it doesn't really matter what our wounding is. It's always something external to us that causes that wounding. It feels very internal, the wounding, and that is by design. It takes sometimes a good portion of our life to recognize what that core wounding is. Where did it hearken from originally? What was that outside force that right, that birthed that original wounding? How have I internalized it in my own mind, in my own self-talk, in my own sense of self and how I think about myself? And then how do I perpetuate this pattern with others outside of myself throughout my life? And the antidote or the cure or the healing salve is about learning how to heal it within. You give yourself that nurturing. You give yourself the confidence. You learn how to love yourself more than anyone else. You learn again and again and again how not to reject yourself or abandon yourself. This is the only way that we heal the core wound, the egoic self that wants to keep us protected, keeping us small, keeping us in the familiar patterns. And so Pluto, at this final opposition to this very personal planet of Mars, is really giving us the final explosion here. That shattering, that dismantling, the breakdown of this wounded egoic self, the final layers of this. Now, this is honestly not for everyone, because not everyone is on this accelerated growth healing journey in this lifetime. And that's okay. That's what their soul chose. But for those of us who are on it, and very clearly on it, we know how accelerated this growth path has been. You may really be, I would say this last month, all of April, maybe even March, it began, where something in your life has shown up and you are like, wow, okay, this is new. This is the next level for me to experience. And this could even be a new, beautiful experience in your life. And yes, it is still shattering some of that wounded egoic self, just like I was saying earlier. So I want to also focus now on the fact that Mars, at this final opposition with Pluto, is moving forward in the sign of Leo. So we went from watery, emotional, childlike Cancer in a retrograde motion of reflection and review and reconnection. And over these months, and most recently, last month, Mars began to move direct, still in shadow period, so we're not completely out of the woods yet. In May, we will be, but still, we should have felt a shift when Mars began to move direct, and now in the sign of Leo as well, because that's a very different energy, and Mars is way more comfortable in Leo, the lion, right? The roar, the passion, the fire, like let's go, the leadership, the heart-led leadership in Leo. But there's something more here. Because Pluto in Aquarius opposing Mars in Leo, very different energy than Capricorn and Cancer. And this is very actually personal for me in my chart. And I want to share with you something that came up for me on my journey and check in to see if this applies to you in some way in your life, within yourself, your psyche, your understanding of yourself. So Mars in Leo. Mars, the assertion, the leadership, the taking action, fighting for something even. In Leo, that heart-led leadership. But guess what? Leo, in its darker shadow expressions, is quite egoic and can really operate from that wounded self, where You have to be the center of attention. You have to be the one creating, because Leo is extremely creative energy, ruled by the sun. The center of attention, you have to be the one creating all the things, right? Whether it's at work or in your relationship or in your own personal life. It's got to be you. You want the credit for that. The sun shines the brightest, right? There's the sun is the center of our solar system. Like, look at me. How can you not see me? I'm the sun. That's Leo, right? And so Aquarius energy, though, the sister sign of Leo across the chart on the axis of self versus the collective, just like I was talking about at the very beginning of this podcast. Aquarian energy is much more about, you know what? I'm going to be part of the creation, right? I'm going to do my part. I'm going to enjoy my part. I'm going to do whatever's needed of me to help this collective that is very much my energy. I feel very resonant with this collective. I want to be a part of this collective, whatever that may be for you, right? But I don't need to be the sun. Leo, Mars and Leo. I don't need to be the sun. I can be a part of this, albeit an important part. I have significant gifts and talents and my unique energy to bring to the collective, certainly, and I recognize that about myself. I honor my true authentic self and know my own specialness, right? But I don't need to be the sun. I don't need to be the center of it all. And that can come at this time in a very explosive way if you have been really fighting that and wanting to be the sun and wanting to be the center of it all. This can be an energy that's going to kind of like hip check you, like out of the center position and be like, okay, listen, you're great, but like we are here to collaborate and nobody's the sun. We all together collectively, we all collectively shine. And so that could be one way that this is showing up for you. Because the other thing I'd like to say about Leo, as compared to Cancer energy, where Mars was, is that Leo is like the adolescent, right? The teenager that is coming into their own, right? Stepping away from the parents, the conditioning of the family and the culture and the society, and trying to find their own way, how they fit in as an individual. That's Leo energy. But Pluto is the more powerful in Aquarius. And so while Pluto was in Capricorn at the very final degrees, 29 degrees, opposing that Mars in Cancer, Pluto was deconstructing the structures, Capricorn, of our childhood in Cancer, Mars in Cancer. And a lot was coming up to the surface for us about that. Pluto in Aquarius, opposing Mars moving forward in Leo, is deconstructing or destroying that sense of egoic self, that adolescent obnoxiousness, right? Where it's like, you know everything, right? You know everything, even when you don't. It's that adolescent, and the thing is, right, like I joke, I kid, it's obnoxious, yes, I mean, but it's necessary because we need to step away, find our own sense of self, away from our parents, away from our family and our culture and the societal norms and all the things, right? And it's a really tumultuous time being a teenager, isn't it? Because on the one hand, we want to be part of some group, many of us, that Aquarian energy is very, very strong for us in our adolescence, in our Leo time. But we're also trying to find like our own sense of self, really, truly. And it can be a very scary time. So that Mars up in the sky right now in Leo, moving forward, is quite egoic. And this Pluto in Aquarius opposing this Mars is saying in a very loud, explosive, mirroring way to our egos, what do you need to break down here? What do you need to let go of that you think makes you the first and the foremost? Now, I want to be clear about this. There is a fine line between the egoic self and the healthy sense of self. You know, we often battle with this word selfish, and it has such negative connotation. But if we spell selfish with a capital S, then that is the healthy selfish, where we know our true selves and what our needs are, what our boundaries should be for ourselves, for our healthy self-care. That's another capital S for self. Self-love, another capital S. It's the higher self guiding us to what we came here to do, who we came here to be in all our authenticity, and another capital S speaking your truth, right? And so the lowercase s for selfish is where like you're just not considering anybody else. You're just kind of the bull in the china shop. Like you want this, you need this, and you're not even considering anyone else. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about, I mean, and there's a fine line between the two, but what we're talking about here is Pluto opposing Mars, saying break down the egoic stuff so that you can get to your true authentic self. Pluto wants us to be in integrity. Pluto wants us to live our truth. But Pluto will take us down into that wounded egoic self first and dismantle some stuff so that we can get there. And we have been working with this energy for the last 6 months in earnest. And so now check in with yourself now. What is the biggest thing now in your life that is consuming so much energy for you? What shifts and changes are happening for you now? What new path are you about to embark upon now? What's changing in your life? Because this is all part of it. These changes would not be happening if you had not changed from within first. If you had not been doing the work on yourself all of these months. So it's all connected. Now, there are some other energies that I want to address here. And that is that Pluto opposing Mars, Pluto in Aquarius opposing Mars in Leo. These two planets, Pluto and Mars, are also squaring the Sun in Taurus and Black Moon Lilith. And, which by the way, she is in Scorpio. And this is happening when the moon is in her dark moon phase. Because we are coming up on the Taurus new moon on the 27th of April, which I will have a separate podcast for you guys tomorrow on those energies. But Pluto and Mars squaring Black Moon Lilith in Scorpio and the Sun in Taurus. Okay, this is major energies here that are in a very loud, big way asking us to step into our empowered sense of self, not our wounded egoic self, but our empowered sense of self saying, you know what? I know my value. I know my worth. I know what I bring to the table, and I'm not going, couple of things. Number one, I'm not going to sit at any table in this life, in my life's experience, where I am not honored for what I bring, where I am not valued, where I am not seen as an equal. And I am also not going to give my power away to someone else or something else and feel like the victim. So if you are feeling any sort of victimhood energy, if you are feeling any sort of lack of control, or how do I want to say this? You are giving far too much power. If you are giving far too much power to anyone else besides yourself, any single person, any organization, any even any belief system, any sort of structure in life, this is a call for you to take back your power and know that if you're not feeling good, if you're feeling abandoned or rejected or small, or you cannot speak your truth, or you cannot feel confident and whole within yourself, then guess what? You've given your power away to something or someone else. And this is a call for you to take it back. Black Moon Lilith, in her highest, most beautiful expression, knows her damn worth. And she's not sticking around with anyone or anything who will not see that in her and honor that and treat her as such. Black Moon Lilith, in her shadow expression, will hang around. She will give her power away because she hasn't yet seen her own worth, her own value. So where are you on that spectrum? What about the sun? The sun in Taurus, remember I said earlier, the sun is ego as well. But in its highest expression, the sun is, you shine. How do you shine? What is it about you that shines so beautifully from your heart, from your true authentic self? What are your gifts? What are your talents? What is your light? Right? And this doesn't have to be on like such a huge scale. Maybe you go into CVS and, you see someone in the aisle is same as you and you're looking for the same thing and you just help somebody along because you see it before they do, the product that they're looking for, and you just strike up a conversation, and guess what? It's just connection, because that's one of your gifts. Because you can shine your light in the most mundane little corners of the world. That's a beautiful gift. It doesn't have to be something that changes, everything on the world stage. Like I said earlier, we affect the collective energies just by shining our own beautiful individual lights in our everyday mundane world. So please don't underestimate the beauty of that, the gift of your own individual light. That is the sun, right? And so know your worth, shine your light. Don't, you can walk into any room, anywhere, and shine your light of joy, your light of happiness, your light of sense of humor, of kindness, of compassion, of being helpful. This is the light that I'm talking about with the sun. And in Taurus, this is grounded. This is embodiment. This is energy ruled by Venus. Love, compassion, kindness. right? So, excuse me. And this is all happening while the moon is in her darkest phase. Now, for me, as a moon sister, as a moon witch, as a woman who deeply identifies with the moon, the dark moon phase can be a time of the month where we slow down, where we may have lower energy for getting things done. But it is a time for reflection, of going within, of recommuning with yourself, of that cozy feeling, that quietness that you can only get in your own energy when you're alone. And you know, in the darkness of the sky, that's when the stars shine the brightest, right? And so we can see each of those beautiful gifts in the darkness, in the quietness of the dark moon. We are ending a cycle with the dark moon because the new moon is the next day, beginning a new cycle. So there are no coincidences ever. The fact that this is all happening at the dark moon is a culminating energy. It's a graduation. It is, you are completing something. You are completing at least this layer, right? This layer for this point in our lives of that egoic wounding where you're ready to put it aside and really come home to yourself in a new way at this dark moon phase. So I think this is just beautiful. Just beautiful. And then that Taurus new moon, when she begins to gradually, slowly get more light day by day by day, we will be strengthening that grounded new sense of self, that new light that is shining within us, that new empowerment, value, and worth Taurus energies. And I'll get into that a little bit more in the Taurus New Moon podcast, which I hope you will tune into tomorrow. Let's see. I really think that is all of the main energies that I wanted to break down and discuss with you here today. And I think one of the main things I really would love for each of you to do is give yourself some credit. Give yourself a real, deep, nurturing hug, a pat on the back. Think back to October, November of 2024, and who you were then. Because you're not the same person now. And that's what I mean when I say an accelerated healing and growth path. To think that you're not the same person in many significant ways internally within you in the last 5 months is extraordinary. Let us not underestimate the rapid growth that we are all moving through here. And let's acknowledge that if you need rest, it's important that we honor that we give ourselves that time, that quiet, that time alone in our own energy, and the softness that comes with that. You know, with Taurus, we can go into what our 5 senses need. And so as we move from this opposition and the dark moon into the Taurus new moon, maybe give yourself some time in nature, alone. Maybe cuddle up with a good book and make a delicious cup of tea or your favorite soup, or snack, or if you enjoy baking, right? Take a salt bath. Light a candle. Do a ritual for yourself for the new moon coming up, which I'll talk about more in my next podcast. But these are all Tauran energies, and they're all ruled by Venus, remember. And so what brings you pleasure? What five senses can you connect with that are going to bring you pleasure and softness and quiet and reconnection to self? Now, as you can see on the screen, I have some questions for you. Since November 2024, how have I evolved at the deepest levels? What changes have I made in my life as a result of this deep growth? And then something to take forward is, can I remain open to the unfolding of my life as I embody a more healed version of myself and a higher vibration? Because I want to just say that there is still a period, right, of unknown, of unfolding, and we may not have every answer, and that is okay. I feel like we're each of us getting more comfortable with that in these past few years, right? We're beginning to embrace the uncertain and the unknown and trusting our higher selves who are always guiding us every step of the way. If you've been listening to my podcast for a while, you've heard me talk about that yellow brick road and how we are each the Dorothy with those ruby red slippers, right? Following the yellow brick road, lighting up each brick along the way as we're moving down the path. We can't see the whole path and where it leads to. We don't know the final destinations, but we do trust ourselves. We do trust the universe, the universal forces, our higher selves guiding us down that path. They know each and every destination along the way. So I hope that this podcast, this has really given you a context for what you've been moving through the last 6 months, really. And for you to give yourself an opportunity to see how far you've come and to really, really own your growth and your healing. And to know that we are very much part of creating this new earth. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like in all of its manifestations yet. We're not meant to. But for each of us on this growth path and this healing path and this awakening journey, we know we're here at this time. We're not alone. We're here together, doing our own individual work. And this is where we need to keep our focus. So trust in the unfolding. Trust in your journey so far and how much you've moved through. And always trust in yourself. I want to thank you so much for listening. I'm wishing you a beautiful couple of days. I will be back definitely in the next 2 days, depending on when I publish this video, with the Taurus New Moon podcast for some more insight, questions for reflection, maybe even a new moon ritual. And please, if you feel called to sharing some comments, it really does help my channel. It helps the algorithms on YouTube, so that more people can find my channel, so that my channel can grow, and so that I can feel a connection to those of you out there listening. It's a beautiful energetic exchange when you like the video, you share with someone who might appreciate it and feel supported. And when you leave a comment, it really, really lights up my heart. So thank you so much for considering doing that. And I will see you soon under the moon. Bye-bye for now.